Welcome everyone to another episode of WA This Week. First up, a topic which I suspect is on most of your minds is the issue of the reliability of Western Australia's power supply. Now, we heard this week the ludicrous proposition that Western Australia, now the Premier has confirmed, will be importing coal from the eastern states. I mean, just imagine. You can go and have a look at it on look on Wikipedia and have a look at Collie. Collie's got estimated coal reserves of around 2 billion tonnes. We've got two major coal miners working coal mines at Collie, but this state of Western Australia is now in the position of exporting coal jobs to the eastern states. I mean, this is an unimaginable scenario. I can't imagine that anyone would have thought, even a few weeks ago, that this was ever going to be possible, but we've had confirmation from the Premier that that indeed is going to be happening. Now, we've got a Minister for Energy. He's the Minister responsible for the two coal-fired power stations that are owned by the government in Collie. That is the Collie Power Station and the Muja Power Stations. And he's in charge of those, but he's also the Minister for Mines. The Western Australian government has a long-term supply contract with Premier Coal to supply coal for those power stations. And you'd recall from a previous podcast, we heard these ludicrous excuses from the Minister for Energy as to why there was a restriction. But this is very, very clear. This comes home to the feet of the government. This is a complete failure of the McGowan Labor government to ensure that we have adequate coal supplies from our own coal mines for those power stations, so that you don't have the blackouts over summer that we saw last Christmas. And it seems as though the government's solution to this. So was their government 6 months or 12 months ago? Because they had to know that this was a looming problem. It's not as if we're dealing with some country that's thousands of miles away. This is Collie, a short drive relatively from Perth. And somewhere that the Labor Party boasts that they've got strong connections to. So it can't have been a surprise. So did they do anything to stop this? Quite clearly not, even though they have an enforceable contract with a major company to provide the coal. Instead, what's the government's solution? And I think it's just, you've gone from a situation which, to be frank, is ludicrous, to, I think, a solution which is frankly ludicrous. And that is, the government's solution is not to enforce the contract, but in fact now they're going to issue you all with text messages in the height of summer when you've got your family over on Christmas Day and say, hey, listen, if you don't turn your air conditioner off, we're going to cut your power off. Imagine that. That's their solution. Their solution is to tell you that, send you a text message to say, shut your power off or we'll cut it off. I mean, talk about an absolute admission of abject failure of Energy Minister Bill Johnson and Premier Mark McGowan to provide you with reliable power. This is farcical, and unfortunately, you're the people. You're the person and you're the people who are going to pay the price for their incompetence. Now, Minister Johnson came out in the press a little while ago. He made a statement that the government had done all the work necessary to ensure that we've got a reliable power network over this summer. And the government's gone in and they've examined the network and invested. What did we see last Thursday? Last Thursday, first day since winter over 30, we see over 10,000 homes losing their power supply. Now, the Synergy have come out and said, look, the loss of that power, and Western Power have come out and said the loss of that power, it wasn't in fact due to overheating of the network, it was due to other faults. Well, to be frank, I don't think the householders, those 10,000 householders that were affected, really give a care about whether it was a fault due to the temperature overload of the system or whether it was due to other faults in the network. The reality is that here we are in the mild part of the year still, and we're seeing major power failures. This is not a good portent for this summer. I speak to a lot of people in regional areas and they all tell me, nearly everyone I speak to, they say, David, do you know what we've got? We've got a backup generator because we just cannot rely on power in the regions. And of course it's much, much worse in the regions. But I mean, we're approaching that position in Perth. This government have failed They talk about an energy transition, they talk about what they're doing for the reliability of the network. The proof is, at every level, that they are failing to provide secure power for the people of Western Australia. This week, another great announcement from the Premier that the state of emergency is ending. And you saw with some fanfare the Premier out there in the media saying he's ending the state of emergency and, you know, reiterating all of the great deeds that he's performed during this COVID period. But of course, the thing that I find, well, I guess frustrating, but really disappointing in this is, why would he mislead the people of Western Australia when he knows for a fact that he's not ending the state of emergency? All he's done is transferred all of the state emergency powers, except for state border closures, but all of the others, to the Police Commissioner. That's what he's done. The Labor Party used their numbers to force a bill through Parliament, limiting debate in Parliament and the ability of the opposition to question it. And as I pointed out before, even going through this ruse of hiding all of the information from the opposition until immediately it was introduced into Parliament. But all of those powers, the powers to seize your vehicle, to seize your home, to direct people to do anything that a COVID emergency officer, and that could be a police officer or it could be another person who's nominated, they can force you to do anything they consider reasonable in the circumstances of a COVID emergency. Now, as I've said before, there are times in crises where you need extreme powers, but we do not need these extreme powers now. But why would the Premier mislead the people of Western Australia and say that he's ending the state of emergencies and give all of those powers to the Police Commissioner? Now again, I've made it clear many times, I hold the Police Commissioner in high regard. And you know, do I think the Police Commissioner is going to set out to misuse those powers? I don't think so. But one of the hallmarks of our system of government is checks and balances. And that is no one in our system of government has unfettered power. For example, you know, government gets to make laws that then guide the courts, but all government decisions are usually can be reviewed by a court. And equally, there are other checks and balances in our system. There's always review. A minister has considerable powers, but all of them, everything a minister does, can be subject to review by Parliament and also the courts. What has the government done with this legislation? They've vested all of those powers in the Police Commissioner with no oversight, with no executive review and no ability for Parliament to review. The Police Commissioner doesn't have to explain to anyone, he doesn't have to explain to any soul on earth why he has reached a particular decision, why he's, for example, decided to shut down a region of the state or apply some other control. Now, you know, this goes completely against all of the fundamental principles of checks and balances that underpins our system of democracy in the state of Western Australia. So, you know, it's sort of worse than the Premier being misleading in what he said. It's also, this is really violating a fundamental principle of good governance in this state. We told the government they didn't have to do it, and they know it. The Health Act has very extreme powers. It can deal with everything we need to deal with. They didn't have to do that. But why would the Labor government establish this principle? You know, the trouble is, I've said this many times and we'll see it again and again, I think. We've got a government that is actually obsessed with control, obsessed with secrecy. They don't accept the democratic principles that underpin our government, and that's really disturbing going forward. It worries me about what else this government intends to do in the future. Look, weighty topics this week, but thank you very much for listening. I'm really grateful for that. Don't forget, if you're hearing this for the first time, you can subscribe to this podcast on any of the apps that access podcasts. Otherwise, you can also see the video version on Facebook, Spotify, or YouTube, and you can access those. You know, please share it. Please get the message out. Look, you know, we are seeing more and more people follow this and look at it, and I guess share it with their friends. So please do that. And as I say every single time, please give us your feedback. We love the feedback. It's good for us, it helps us learn and helps us improve what we do in the future. Thank you very much.